Welcome to Let's Talk Passion and Purpose, the podcast where we explore the journeys of creators, leaders, and visionaries who've turned their passions into purpose. Join your host, Nicole Thomas, as we dive into inspiring stories, uncover strategies for success, and help you take the next step toward a life filled with meaning. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Passion and Purpose with Nicole Thomas. I'm excited because this evening I'm here with Tamara J. Madison. Tamara is a poet, author, editor, spoken word artist, and instructor. Her work has appeared in World Literature Today, Poetry International, Callaloo, The Amistad, and other journals and magazines. Her work, Read This Road Not Damascus, is published by Trio House Press, and her work has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net. She is creator and host of Breakdown, The Poet and the Poems, a YouTube poetry conversation series, and she has also featured her work on the TEDx platform. Tamara enjoys facilitating generative creative writing workshops, and she is an MFA graduate of New England College and a Hedgebrook, UCross, and Anaphora Literary Arts Fellow. Tamara has received Individual Artist Awards from United Arts of Central Florida and has received an Individual Artist Career Opportunity Grant from South Arts. She currently lives and teaches in Florida while completing a new poetry collection based on her lineage. Tamara, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here with us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. It's exciting to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. So tell us, how did you get started on your journey as a poet and spoken word artist?
I've always been a nosy little girl that loved language and stories. I love to listen to people tell stories. And so I've been doing that ever since I was really, really young. I've heard stories about how I was a very talkative little girl, even when I was really little. And then in school, when they introduced poetry to us, I just found it intriguing. And I thought it was really, really interesting, right? And I realized that I had a knack for language. I was great in mathematics as well, but I also had a knack for language. And, it's really interesting because we always think that a student does best in one thing and not the other. I could do both of them really well, but I found language to be a lot more intriguing. And then as an adolescent, when you start learning a bit more about the world and what's going on and the injustices and all of that kind of thing, language and particularly poetry became a safe haven for me, right? To process anger and frustration and, my lack of understanding sometimes about things going on in the world. It was a safe place, right, to be a rebellious teen. So it didn't get me in trouble if I wrote in my journal, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And then it just stayed with me. It was a way of processing. It was a way to grow personally. And, I went into school and started doing something totally different because I was great at mathematics. And I just didn't find it fulfilling. I just, I was like, yeah, I can do this, but it's not doing anything for me. And so I asked myself at that time, and I'm like, okay, well, if I change my major or whatever, what am I going to do? And so I thought, okay, what have you always enjoyed? What has always intrigued you? Go back to when you were younger. Is there any consistent thread anywhere? Right? And that consistent thread for me was language and poetry. And so that was when I was like, okay, you know what? I really need to put more time and energy into it and take it seriously.
So was at that point when you just weren't fulfilled with mathematics and you leaned on what brought you joy? What did you tell yourself in order to be able to pivot? Because that's a huge change from mathematics to language, even though you enjoyed both.
Okay, so I was technically in the engineering program, right? And so that was what my major was going to be. And I chose engineering because I was great at mathematics at that time. And I just realized that I really wasn't that happy doing it. It just wasn't exciting for me. I wasn't that happy. And I really asked myself, I actually started off as a cooperative engineer student, right? Where I would go to school one semester and then I worked for a major company, right, in the engineering program. So it gave me actual experience while I was in college. And my last term there, I was like, you know what? Can I really see myself doing this 5 years from now? And I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. And so that was when I was like, okay, it's time to do something different because I'm doing something for it, but it's not doing something for me. It wasn't fulfilling. And so that was what I asked myself. Can you see yourself doing this in 5 years?
That's poignant. That is such a poignant question because a lot of us when we're younger, we don't even think about those questions, like critically analyzing our life and our future.
Mhm.
So at a young age, you decided that pivotal moment, you had to ask yourself that question. How did your writing evolve? Did you end up going to get an MFA? Did you take more creative writing courses? How did you hone your craft when you made the pivot?
When I made the pivot, it was really personal, right? So when I first made the pivot, I was like, yes, I'm going to pursue my writing. I'm going to keep doing this, but I didn't really have a vision for it or anything like that. And I just knew whatever else I was going to be doing, even if I chose a different degree or whatever, I would keep doing this. And I actually studied another language. And so studying another language and learning that language fluently, going to school in a different country for a year made me pay even more attention to language, right? Which made it even more exciting for me, right? But it was still more of a personal thing. And so I graduated with a bachelor's degree in French because that was the quickest thing I could get to get out of school and have a degree, right? And I did not go back to get my MFA for many, many years. I just didn't because writing was more of a personal thing for me. I was a spoken word artist. At that time, I concentrated a lot more on the stage. I was a performance poet. And I mean, that started back in my Chicago days with the Green Mill Lounge and all of that kind of stuff. And then later, I was like, okay, so what happens when I'm no longer on the stage or I'm no longer alive? Or will my work stand up on the page as well as it does the stage? And so I started having those questions. And then there were some things that I wanted to write about that I felt like I just did not have the tools I needed to tell them effectively, to tell these stories effectively. That was when I decided to go back and get an MFA. And that was many years after my bachelor's degree. So I went back at that particular time and gathered my tools. And ever since then, it's been about the writing in a totally different way.
I tell you that is so amazing. And the fact that you didn't go for an MFA right away, but spoken word sounds like it was first, along with poetry. How did you step into the world of spoken word and performing? What does that look like for someone who loves language and also poetry?
Oh, girl, always a
Like,
performer. I was always a performer, right? Like, I mean, when I was a little girl, I taught my sister, right? How to, when I was in concert in the living room, right, with the record player, I taught my little sister just when the precise cue was to run to the bathroom to get the towel so that when I fell on my knee at the end of a James Brown song, she could drape it over my shoulders. Okay. It was like there were concerts in my house. Like the record player was going out in the middle of the floor singing. I'm surprised my mother didn't just slap me at times because I would light up the whole house. So that was always like a part of things going on. I remember music, right? There was music. I remember my mother and father dancing and going to parties. And then, church was very much a part of the background. So for me, it wasn't just about religion, but that whole thing of the pastor telling a story, right? It was like a story, and the way the voice would rise and fall, and, the beginning, middle, and end, all of those kinds of things were storytelling elements for me. Or listening to that same pastor, my grandfather, tell stories, right, at the kitchen table late in the evening. So that performance aspect, I think, was always there. And I think, for a lot of Black culture, storytelling is a thing for us. It's
Yeah.
not just what you say, it's how you say it. We speak a tonal language as well, even though it's English, right? Or whatever you want to call an adaptation or whatever of it. So that performance aspect was just a part of the community and everything where I grew up, and I was attracted to it.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you, that's fantastic. And I can relate to the storytelling around the table, just being around family, and then not just what you say, how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful how you were able to translate your experience from growing up and being around family to this stage to impact others. What is your source? What has been your source of inspiration for your writing and even your spoken word when you were focusing on spoken word?
The language itself, one, music, absolutely music, and relationships. I find relationships intriguing, and that's what I write about. Whether it's the relationship of me with myself, or the relationship between the divine and the self, or the relationship between people that I don't even know. Relationships I find intriguing. So I'm not usually that out in nature, write about daisies kind of person or poet, right? It's usually something to do with relationships. And music is a definite influence for me, music and rhythm.
Music and rhythm, and also just the love of language. I want to take a step back because you did mention studying another language,
Mm-hmm.
being out of the country for 1 year. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience and how learning another language shaped you? And which country? Where did you study? And do you recommend, this is a stat question, do you recommend for someone who is focusing on their writing to go to another country, learn another language as a part of their growth in writing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because what happens is, when you grow up in your mother tongue, there are things that you learn organically, right? You just learn them organically. When you study another language, you start looking at language more technically. Like, what is the past tense? What is a present tense? What is the immediate present tense? What are prepositions? Where does it come? You start looking and tweaking those little technical things when you study a different language. How do you conjugate a verb? I didn't even know what conjugation was until I started studying French, right? So it made me pay a lot more attention to detail to the language of my own mother tongue. And poetry is all about the details. It's extremely detailed, right? And so it was a great experience because of that. Great experience. And I would very much, encourage people to do that.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you. So your poetry is known for its depth and richness. Can you share a little bit about your creative process and how you approach the act of writing itself?
Oh, my first response is I think the writing approaches me, right?
Tell me
Um,
more. What exactly does that mean?
mm, it's, like when sometimes it can be hearing a line of a song. Sometimes it's what someone says. Um, Sometimes it's a snatch of a conversation that you hear. Sometimes it's a song itself. And then sometimes it feels like this voice or this story or an inkling that comes from someplace else, right? And there's something that I feel in my body like, oh, what was that? You know what I mean? And I pause for a moment and then if I can, I lean in deeper, right? More deeply, and I listen some more. And if I can't immediately stop and just take notes and write a poem right then, I'll try and jot something in my phone and return to it later, right? So there have been times when I've just heard a line, and that line itself was so intriguing that I put it in my phone, and then I came back later and I meditated on that line. Um, Other times it has been looking at a picture and listening to what the picture has to say or musing over that picture. And then every once in a while, it is looking out the window or something that I see in nature. But that always brings me back to relationships in one way or another. And so after that, after jotting the note down, I return to the note, try to flesh out a draft with that note. And then from there, it's just about revising that poem until it feels, what's the word I want to use? Fulfilled. I don't know if it can ever really be perfect, because I think writing is one of those kinds of things where you can always edit and revise or tweak something, right? But when the poem itself tells me that it is fulfilled or that it is done, then I can move on. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So when it's fulfilled and you jot down notes, and then you go back to them to flesh out details of your poems. What does your, I guess, practice look like? Do you have structured writing time, or is it more fluid? Do you say, okay, every day at 6 a.m., I'm writing?
One of these days when I grow up, I'm going to be able to do that. I really am. I keep telling myself it's not over. I still have a shot at it, right? And that's my dream life. My dream life is to wake up in the morning and to have the same routine. And that's what we do when we write. I have found that the only time that the closest that I get to doing that and feel most successful with it is usually when I'm on a residency or a retreat. And all I have to do is write anyway, right? I'm away from home. I'm in another country or I'm in another state. I wake up in the morning, I have a little bite to eat or whatever. I go to my studio and I sit and write because I'm at an artist residency program, and that's what I'm going to do, right? Nobody's asking me what's for dinner or anything like that. Or, I don't have to clean the house or anything like that, right? So that's when I accomplish that the most. So when I'm not on a residency, what I try to do is tell myself, okay, I'm going to invest this many hours a week on my writing. And because I'm a wife and because I'm a mom and because I'm a professor, I understand that if I say I'm going to get 20 hours of writing in that week, I understand that sometimes that might be 5 hours one day and maybe 2 hours the next, right? 3 hours the next day, and maybe I'm just exhausted the day after that, right? But I tried to reach that goal. And I recently, Nicole, I found the greatest thing. I was reading some newsletter and I found this blog that they featured. And this woman was talking about this very thing with regards to her writing and how she said the same thing you did. Okay, I promised myself I was going to get up at this. And she said, and it never works. And she shared that what works for her is to take a separate agenda. And instead of writing your dates and appointments and everything you say you're going to do in it, simply log how much time you put into your business, your writing, or whatever it is, right? How many hours each day? And she was just saying that she found that to be very helpful to help her be accountable and also see what her patterns were, right? And I was like, I'm doing it. And literally, I just started it just this week. Today's Thursday, and I can feel the difference. I can see the difference because there's something for me. I'm that corny list person where I like to create a list for myself and check down the list. Well, at the end of the day or the following morning, when I go to that agenda and I write in there, yesterday I completed 6 hours, and I make a couple of bullet points about what that was. So let's say maybe administrative work, editing poems, and then following up on the blah, blah, blah project, right? There's something about having that down for me that is motivating and very, very helpful. And I don't have any other appointments or anything else in there, right, to jumble what's in that agenda. It's nothing about this is the way I showed my commitment this day, this week, this month. And I'm excited to continue doing it just to see what my patterns are and go back and take a look.
Thank you for sharing this information. It's a new
Yeah.
tip. And I have to try it as well. So logging your hours and not really looking at the to-do list, checking off that to-do list, but showing up. And that's the hardest part, getting started.
And you know what's really
Okay.
funny? And I didn't even think about this myself until you just said that. You said logging hours. I was like, wait a minute. We log hours when it comes to working for someone else.
Yeah.
Right?
do.
You punch the clock, you do whatever on the computer, whatever it is, we log hours. And it makes all the sense in the world. If this is something that really means something to you, this is your business or your endeavor or whatever, why aren't you logging hours with yourself? Because the reason why we log hours at the job is to be accountable to the supervisor.
Yes.
So if you are your own supervisor, why not? Yeah.
Yeah. Or our own accountability partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I really love this idea. I'm going to, not idea, the tip I'm going to implement this week. So I do want to ask you, I know we talked a little bit because I'm so focused on writing and helping writers who sometimes feel stuck, even like myself, right? Getting started, getting in the flow. And I know that you have inspiration from different sources, but do you have any habits that help you get into a flow? I know some people light a candle. I've heard people say there's no such thing as writer's block. So I play music and I just sit and let the information flow. Do you have any habits or rituals that you practice pertaining to the writing that relate to getting it out of your head onto paper?
I think the most helpful thing to me isn't a particular ritual, it's an understanding. And that understanding is that there's no such thing as writer's block. There really isn't. Writer's block for me is an illusion. If I think I have writer's block, I simply have not nurtured my muse. It's just that simple. I have not been filling the well with water. That's all that there is, right? That's one reason. The other reason there's an illusion of writer's block, if I'm not writing, and let's say that I have been nurturing my muse. If I'm not writing, then maybe I'm censoring myself, or maybe there's something I'm afraid of, that I'm not quite ready for it to come out of my subconscious into my consciousness, right? And so I understand those things. And so because of that, I never say I have writer's block. I just don't. I don't believe in it. And I think that self-censorship and that lack of nurturing the muse are really critical. So if I haven't, for example, if I haven't written poetry in a long, long time and I feel stumped, I have to ask myself, when was the last time I read a poetry book? When was the last time I watched an independent film? When was the last time I watched a sunrise or sunset? Right? When was the last time I stared at a candle? All of those things we have access to, but are we making ourselves accessible to them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's my understanding. And so because of that, it's not hard to get in the groove of writing. And if I'm not doing that, then I have to ask myself, okay, Tamara, what are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of?
Right. Where are you thinking this poem might go that you don't want to go there? That type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I do have one additional question. When you ask, because you ask such great questions, you ask yourself great questions that pull you along, you're coaching yourself through the process. And you're asking what you're afraid of coming up, put down on paper. How do you move through whatever is blocking you so that you're vulnerable enough because you fill the well, do all these things to pour into yourself, yet this fear creeps in. How do you move past that fear, which is probably, that could be, not probably, could be just fear of being vulnerable because of whatever you want to write, what you feel that you need to put down and give birth to in the world. Do you have any advice for anyone?
Yes. I remember that the page is not going to judge me.
Page is not going to judge.
It's not. The page is not going to talk back to me and say anything or hurt my feelings at all. So me putting it down on the page is for me first. Why would I be afraid of that? And I have been, and I have to remind myself that I don't have to be. Girl, just write it. You know what I'm saying? That just happened to me. I believe it was just this week. It was something that I was going to sit down and write about. And it was a piece that I knew. I heard this line. I was listening to a poetry reading, and I heard this woman say in her poem, "I cannot love without my sister." I was like, there it goes. I just knew it was a trigger for me, right? I was like, okay, that's it. I typed it into my phone, right? So the next day I sit down for my writing session and I pull that little note up. I cannot love without my sister. And I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, you know what I mean? What does that really mean? Am I really going to be able to write a poem that is worthy of her? What's going to happen here? Right. And I sat there for a minute, hemming and hawing about it. And then finally it was like, just write the poem. Just write the poem. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to show her. Nobody ever, who's going to know that I wrote it if I don't say anything? Right. And so that first draft is for you. It is for your sanity, your clarity, your personal growth, all of those things. Now, what you decide to do with it from that point is a totally different matter. You may never want to publish it or anything like that. And that is your right and that choice. But you have interacted with yourself. You have given yourself that opening. And you don't have to wonder for the next however many years, days, or whatever of your life, what if?
Yeah.
You don't have to do that. No, I think I am more afraid of having a life end with what ifs than I am of having a life that has a lot of failures and pain. That's the greatest pain to me. Having a life of things that regrets. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So your book, Read This Road Not Damascus,
Yes.
has such an intriguing title. Did you talk about the inspiration behind that collection and its theme?
Yes. That book was inspired by, I would say, conversations that I have had with women for well over 10 years. Right?
Really?
Yes. For a long, long time. This whole idea of there's the maiden, the love goddess, and the crone. Or there's Oshun, Yemanya, and Oya. There's all of these separate goddesses. Ooh, which one are you? That type of thing, right? And this idea of we are one or the other instead of all of those energies combined, right? And so, one day I just had this vision of what would it look like if it were a being where all of those energies were combined, right? And I had this vision and I ended up writing this piece for what I consider to be like a spirit guide or what have you in this vision. And then I started putting this collection of pieces together. In the book, it is a bit, what's the word that they use? The word escapes me at the moment. Speculative. It's a bit speculative because there is a spirit guide in the book, and the spirit guide in the book is three-breasted woman, right? And she's like all of those things combined. And she serves as a spirit guide to the voice of the poet in the book. And the poet moves through this rite of passage with her. And so threed is because she has the three breasts, right? And anything that is threed is akin to her, right? And so that was how it all came together. And it was a very interesting journey to listen for those poems and record what I was hearing and what I was feeling, and to create what that voice sounds like in my head and in my heart, so to speak.
Well, that's fascinating. It's fascinating. I tell you, it's so amazing the body of work that you're able to produce, how you take language and then just everything around you to create beautiful collections of work. As a guide to help other people on their journey as well with understanding. I want to take a step back to look at your work as a spoken word artist. Do you feel like there's a difference when you're reading your work aloud? Does it enhance or change the experience of the work?
For me, one influences the other very fluidly and very easily. As a spoken word artist, I am tuned into the way the words sound, the way that they land, the way that they float on the air, the rhythm of the words, the music of the words. I'm in tune to all of that as a spoken word artist because I'm communicating very directly with an audience trying to reach them. Well, it's the same thing on the page. On the page, I need to be concerned about the way the words sound as well and the way that they land. I would say in answer to your other question, though, is there a difference when I'm performing a piece? Yes, because when you have the page, it's the page, the words, and your mind. When I'm performing a piece, there's the cadence of my voice. There's the volume and the dynamics of my voice. There are the dramatic pauses that may not be on the page. All of that is still communicating and talking at one time. So you have those added elements in a spoken word context that you don't have flat on the page. But the page may pay much closer attention to more technical content, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
So for me, they do influence each other. And there are times when I'm working on a piece that is for the page because I don't perform as much anymore. But if I'm feeling that something on that page is not working or is not right, I read it out loud to myself.
Oh, you do?
Yes, because then there are times when my ear will pick up what my mind has not been able to catch that needs to be worked on in that piece. Yeah. So for me, they work very, very symbiotically and well together.
Oh, thank you for clarifying. Thank you. So you teach creative writing workshops. What excites you the most about helping others tap into their own creative voices?
What excites me the most is when I get that person that knows that revision is a treasure hunt.
Oh, tell me more about revision.
So, people want to take creative writing classes because they need to boost their GPA or because they've had a bad breakup and they just need to express how they feel and all of that kind of stuff, right? And it's like, no, I don't want to rewrite it because I meant it the way I said it the first time, right? And I had a student say in one of my classes, and it was recently, I would say within the past year or so, we had this discussion about revision, and this student said, the first draft is for you, the writer. Subsequent drafts are for the reader. That's when you're taking the reader into consideration and you're evaluating if you're really communicating with more than just yourself, right? And so when I have a student that understands that and dives in and is not afraid of tearing a poem apart and seeing what comes back to me is just really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. I mean, for you probably, but not for the student or the poet. Sometimes seeing your work, just right, even red marks, you almost want to cringe because you're so wonderful putting everything on the page. But when you get to the point, as you said, the mindset that the first draft is for you, and that changes the game. It really does. It does. How does teaching impact your own work as a writer?
It takes away from my personal writing time.
Okay. Any other impact?
It keeps me engaged with writing. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, because I do love language. And I I know that I should always be studying it, right? And so the fact that I'm teaching something that I particularly love keeps me engaged with it, even though it isn't on the level that I'm working on. It's still keeping me engaged with language. And I love seeing language empower people. That inspires me, right? Okay. When a student tells me, I've never, ever gotten an A or a B on an essay assignment before. I always thought I was better at science. That to me is interesting and exciting.
That's nice to hear, right? The excitement is a part of the process of you being a writer and supporting other writers. Yeah, it's beautiful. You've received fellowships and awards, including support from organizations like Hedgebrook and South Arts. How important is community and institutional support in your life as an artist, as a writer?
It's critical. And it's critical because of the question that you just asked me, right? Because I have a hefty teaching load. I teach 6 writing classes. That's not an overload. That's my contract, right? And because of that, when I said something about it taking time away from my writing, which I agreed to, right? I meant it. I wasn't exaggerating at all. And so that means that me being in community is absolutely critical. It's critical for me to survive as an artist and as a writer. Having that one-on-one person that I can pick up the phone and call anytime to consult with or to mourn with, over my writing, or to get suggestions from, or to share resources with, that's absolutely critical. Being in a circle of people that are writing at the same time or that come to a place, to fulfill some kind of creative endeavor. That for me, as far as I'm concerned, I need to do that every single summer when I get that 6 weeks off.
It's important. It is important. Definitely is. Thank you for sharing. Can you tell us a little bit more about the poetry collection that you're working on that's based on your lineage?
Yes, I would love to tell you about that. I will state first, though, that it was inspired by my last book. When I was in the editing process for Threed, This Road, Not Damascus, Threed is actually in 3 sections, right? The first section is about 3-breasted woman introducing herself and that leading up to moving through my lineage, right? The middle section is about after me being born and the poet being present and the poet's life, right? The last section is the poet's more of the poet's rite of passage and the poet's growth as a result of being in contact with this spirit guide. So when we were working on this collection editing, my sister happened to find a picture of my great-great-grandmother, and she sent it to me in a text message. And I said, oh my God, I have to write a poem about her, and it must be in this book, right? And so I did that, and I put her in the first section, which is about lineage. And ever since then, there's just been this obsession with my blood, right? Obsession with lineage and genealogy and all of those kinds of things, right? And so that poem spilled into this new book where it's all about that. It's all about that. All of the poems are inspired by my maternal and paternal lineage and the research that I've been doing, letters that I've found, documents that I've discovered, census records, stories that have been told in my family, pictures that my mother gathered. My mother was like the story keeper for the family. And so she told us many of these things as children, and she kept a lot of the pictures and things. So, this project is all my lineage. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. Great. You're continuing the legacy, you're keeping your history alive. You're documenting everything.
And you know what? I have to say that the other thing that started this project, I believe next month, it'll be 3 years ago. It was Black History Month in February. And many of my maternal ancestors, their birthdays were in February for some reason, right? And so that Black History Month, I was like, you know what? Yay, it's Black History Month. I want to post something special, right? And I thought to myself, you know what? I don't want to post all of the people that are posted over and over and over and over again. I'm posting my people, right?
Yeah.
Started posting my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my grandmother. And I just put like little anecdotes about each of them, right? On these Facebook posts. And I was doing it just for me, right? Just as a writing exercise. And people started responding, right? Actually, one dear, dear friend of mine, as a result of those posts, she went on a journey to find her birth mother, right? For the very first time in her life. And so I was really surprised to see how people were responding when I knew they didn't know these people. And so that when I was like, that was when I was like, I need to do something with this. And so then I collected all of those posts and those photos, and I started listening for their voices and what stories needed to be told. And that is what has spilled into this particular book.
Wow. I tell you, this is amazing.
It is, because I feel really honored to be doing something like that, to hear these voices, to be able to record them. It's a very humbling experience, and you learn a lot too.
Mhm. You do. You do. Just being attuned to your history. I tell you, that's powerful. And I think a lot of families would benefit from looking at their lineage, going back. But sometimes they don't know how to start, where to start. Do you have any advice for someone who would want to begin the journey of exploring?
Sure.
Mhm.
Start with the people who are still living. Listen to their stories. My husband just brought me a voice recorder for Christmas, and I thought to myself, God, I wish I had had this years ago. Record your elders while they're here. Listen to what those stories are. Gather pictures, find pictures. All too often, pictures are in somebody's basement or somebody's attic. That person is gone, and people just clear things out, right? And you're losing a whole legacy. I shared with a very powerful visual artist. Her name is Ellen Blaylock. I'm looking at her work right there. And she does these amazing storytelling quilts, right? And I was telling her how my great grandmother made all of her great grandchildren quilts, all 9 of us, right? And she was like, well, where is yours? I was like, girl, I don't know. I haven't seen it in years. And she said, shame on you. She said, you have no idea what that is worth. And I took that very seriously, right? And so a lot of the time we have these things and we just don't know what their worth really is. So start there, ask questions, listen to stories, start gathering pictures, start gathering obituary programs or funeral programs that have those obituaries, names and dates and places.
Yeah.
And yes, you can start there. And then, there are places where you can open accounts for free and they'll give you access to census records and all of those kinds of things sometimes.
Wonderful advice. Thank you. Thank you. What advice would you give to aspiring writers or creatives who are looking to find their voice and carve out a path in their artistic journey? Do you have any advice for them?
Yes, just write
That's right.
and keep writing and read. And I will say, read what resonates with you and what pushes you, right? If it's something challenging, but something in you says that you need to get through the book or whatever anyway, do that. Do that. For some of us, reading Shakespeare and Robert Frost and Sylvia Plath, that may not be necessarily what we need for our journey, but it is only in the reading that you will start to gather and find the things that are needed for your journey to grow you and nurture you as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to find that unless you read it.
Unless you read.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of writers forget how important reading is.
Oh, they're hand in hand. They're first cousins. So that and writing together. And whenever you feel like you have a blockage, you have to ask yourself, what was the last thing I read? How long ago was it?
Mm-hmm. Important questions.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any specific lesson or piece of wisdom that has helped you stay grounded in your own creative process?
Just what I said. Keep writing. Keep writing. When I was a college student, I, in my excitement, took my little poetry folder to my English classes teaching assistant. And I was so excited to show her my work or whatever. She flipped through a few pages and then looked up at me and said, I don't know what this is, but you might want to think about doing something else.
Really?
Really? Really? Right? And so, a little while thereafter, I remember there was a guest writer that came to the cultural center on campus as a speaker, and I was able to get to see her. And I did the same thing. I took my writing to her and I, waited to see what she would say. And she said, keep writing. And I told her what happened in that instance. And she said, keep writing. And so I still keep writing.
Powerful. And look where you are now. Keep
Yeah.
writing.
And I would say one other thing, do not be afraid to go and gather the tools that you need, right? Whether it's taking a workshop, joining a writing group, getting an MFA, or doing a retreat with writers or your self-study, do not be afraid of getting the extra tools that you need so that you fulfill your commitment to your work.
Yeah, it's important. Is there anything that you would like to share with the audience that I have not asked you?
Yes. And I think it goes back to what you asked me about working in the classroom. And one of the things that I kind of discovered maybe within the past 2 to 3 years that I didn't really think about, because writing for me is so natural, right? But for the people who come to my classroom, they hate it and they're just trying to hurry up and get it out the way so they can take another class, right? And one of the things that I started sharing with my students is that writing is not just about this class or your profession, because some people think that, oh, I'll never need to use writing in what I'm right. Writing is about paying attention to detail. Where does the comma go? What is the most precise and effective word to use in a situation to be the most persuasive, right? Where does there need to be white space on the page? Should the lines be closer together or should there be breadth and space between them? It's all about these teeny tiny details. And poetry is even more detailed, right? But here's the thing. If you learn to write well, you're tuning your brain to pay attention to detail, which means that you can pay attention to detail in other areas that you want to master, whether it is personal growth or personal relationships or this profession that you say you want. It's all about the detail. The people who exceed, right, and go further are the people that are paying attention to the details that other people are not, right? And that is as true in personal relationships as it is in professional. And writing is a fabulous exercise for that. And I think a lot of people sleep on that. And writing is also a very deep meditative practice. Many of us don't pray anymore. We don't meditate anymore. We don't sit on porches and watch the sunset anymore. We don't listen to cicadas or whatever. And that's where some of that expansion takes place, right? So if we're not doing that, then journaling in a book or writing on the page is the next best meditation place for us who are way too busy for everything else.
Yes, that's so true. So true. Thank you for that. So looking ahead, what are you most excited about on your creative journey? What's next for you?
My own growth is what is most exciting for me, right? I love it when I end up with something on the page and I go, ooh, like, I didn't know I could do that. Where did that come from, right? I still have those moments and I really, really love them. The other thing that is next for me is publishing what I'm working on now, because I know when I publish this book, this work, all of my people get to come with me, right? I had the opportunity to read in Harriet Tubman's church in Auburn, New York. And I read excerpts of that work and I invited them all to come on in the room, right? And I feel like any place my writing takes me, it takes all of them as well. And that for me is really, really exciting.
It sounds exciting. Do you know when, or do you have a plan on when it may be released? Is it?
No, and I'm still working on it and I'm still trying to find a retreat space to do some deep, deep editing. And one of the reasons why it has taken so long is because just this past July, in doing this creative work and this research, I found my father's father and this whole host of cousins, which is a whole new writing arm and component for this project. So it occurred to me, it's like, Tim, you can't rush this. You have to let it evolve and you have to let it grow. And so I'm putting myself on a track to have major edits done by September of this year. And then I want to submit it to see where I can find someone who will publish it. And then, of course, that usually takes a year as well. So it'll be at least a couple of years. Yeah, but that's really, really exciting to me. And I had thought of one other thing that I find exciting. Writing is something that you never outgrow. I will never be too old to be a writer. I might be too old to be a cheerleader or to do a shake. You know what I'm saying? And that's not permissible, but I will never be too old to be a writer. It is one of those things that evolves with you. You know what I mean? If I were standing on the stage half naked after a certain point, that's not going to work as well for me to do. You know what I'm saying? Or, these acrobatic things that many people do in professions or playing professional ball. But this, you don't outgrow that. And I think that's really exciting.
That is exciting. Where can we find you? Your website, social media handles. How can we find Tamara Madison?
My stuff is everywhere, and everything is under Tamara J. Madison. And you have to put the J in the middle because there's another poet named Tamara Madison who's
Another poet.
Yes. And she speaks French and used to teach French. Yes. But she pronounces her name Tamara.
Okay.
She's Tamara Madison, Tamara Madison. So I put the J in the middle of mine because there were times when I would Google my name or go to look up something and her picture would pop up, right? Or there'd be times when someone would send me this deeply heartfelt response about an amazing poem that I wrote. And I'm like, that's not me. You know what I mean? So just make sure you put the J in the middle. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, and then I have a website, tamarajmadison.com.
Wonderful. Well, Tamara, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. You've opened my eyes to so many different ways to look at my writing, and I know that this episode will help others. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope so.
Thank you for joining Let's Talk Passion and Purpose. I hope you're leaving inspired and ready to elevate your journey. Remember to subscribe, rate, and share if you enjoyed today's episode. Stay connected, follow your passion, live purposefully, and we'll see you next time.